When you think about businesses like Allbirds or Skims that are selling through the roof, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and brilliant marketing. But what's often overlooked is the business behind the business that makes it all possible. For millions of businesses, that's Shopify. Nobody does selling better than Shopify, the home of the #1 checkout on the planet. With Shop Pay, you can boost conversions by up to 50%, meaning fewer abandoned carts and way more sales. Whether your customers are scrolling online, strolling through your store, or browsing social media, Shopify ensures you're ready to sell wherever they are. It's no secret, businesses that want to grow with Shopify. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/DAX, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/DAX to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/DAX.
Hey, everyone, and welcome back to the Happily Never After show. I'm your host, Kate Mollison, and I'm here with a new and dear friend, Megan Kopka. She is a certified financial planner, and I am excited to have her. We're going to talk about all things finances in this widowhood journey. Megan, thanks so much for joining me today.
Kate, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. So you not only have the financial planner piece, but you also have been through the widowhood journey. So you come from a place of experience. Would you like to share with our listeners a little bit about yourself and about your journey?
Sure. Yeah, I'll take it from the personal side first. As far as for me, I had children young. And I became a math teacher because somebody needed a normal schedule to fit in with the clients. And although it was never a life goal or aspiration to teach, I do believe at being great at whatever you try and tackle. So I wanted to have the children's schedule. I wanted to be able to be the mom that was home. My late husband was a French classically trained chef. He went to the Culinary Institute of America. So he worked nights and weekends. So it was really important to me to have that grounding. And when the kids got a little bit older, I decided it was time to lean into my professional career. I got my bachelor's degree in economics. So believe it or not, like I am super curious about the markets, the economy globally, how the political parts can influence it. I mean, every facet of the markets really does intrigue me to a high end. And I know that's not the same for everyone, but the numbers behind it did as well. So I used to challenge my students and tell them algebra was everything. You take a problem and you try and whittle it down to the least unknown variable, right? We try and mitigate and simplify the equation, right? Don't we do that in life? We simplify our life.
I wish that my math teachers had used that philosophy because math was always what I struggled with. So I appreciate that beauty in the simplicity.
Oh gosh. So like I tried to be the memorable math teacher. So I don't know if you're putting this on, but I'll do like y mx plus b, right? Lowercase b right there.
With the hand gestures. I love it.
That's right. Like y mx plus b. That was the slope formula. And so one thing that even leaning from algebra into widowhood, grief was exponentially harder than I thought. Right. So if that's the slope formula, that's a linear path, and we are no longer on a linear path. I think we are on the crazy squiggle path. But when I talk about things being exponentially harder or the growth of market returns, that is a parabola, right? So
all these math terms, we're going to use like a glossary, and there will be a quiz later for all of you listening. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, like another way that I'll open conferences is that, what is the universal language? And everyone says love. And I'm like, yeah, the Beatles had it right. But numbers are universally recognized as well, right? So when we think about it, I like to think about financial planning as almost like meditative breathing, right? Our cash flow comes in and our cash flow goes out.
Mm.
What happens if we hold our breath, or what happens if we hyperventilate? Likely that you will faint. What happens when we spend money too fast, or we spend money and we hoard it, or don't spend money and hoard it, right? Where is that healthy balance? So trying to think about cash flow like the ocean cycle, or like your meditative breath, to me is also very important. The big thing I think about serving women in the realm of finance is focusing and paying attention to the fact that we have been held out of the legal and financial realm for almost all of written history. And so trying to get through the shame and the lack of knowledge is usually the first barrier. So you really have to get in tune, again, like cash flow, breathing. Oh gosh, if I open up my checkbook, or if I open up my statement, how am I feeling? Take a moment and really think about, gosh, this makes me really nervous. What is so scary about this? And just let those feelings wash over you. Because I know in early widowhood, all the feelings felt like a cacophony of everything. It was just
Great
severe.
word.
Yeah.
The
It was
former English major
grief.
in me is like, cacophony.
It's everything. It's anger and envy and sorrow and
It
turmoil. I mean,
really
it's
is.
every what we call the negative emotions. And I don't want to give them a bad rap, because it's intuition. It's what helps us stay alive. And
And they're
when
equally as important as the positive ones, right? To like be able to sit with those feelings, good, bad, or indifferent, and just let them live. Super important.
yes, and be aware of them and start asking why. Because I think when you get to the why, that's going to give you that first inkling of how to get out of or reconcile negative emotions with money, because money is survival for us today. It's just it's foundational. When we think about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we really need to know security wise that we're going to be okay, and money is a resource. That is the resource. We're no longer on the bartering system. We are using currency. So it's really truly important, and that's one of the things that I try and help people do. And I will tell you, so back to my widow story, my late husband was diagnosed with ALS in April of 2010. I was working at Merrill Lynch at the time, and about 6 months earlier, his global company had dropped disability insurance.
Oof.
And I went to the Merrill Lynch portal and priced out his insurance plan, and it was going to be 5 times more than a group plan. And so I just decided we didn't need that. And then here you are 6 months later, and we totally needed that. So I hope, and knock on wood, that's the greatest mistakes I ever made in financial planning were in my own plan. I totally put my family at risk, and I did it eyes wide open. I made a really bad decision to be cheap in the now and not protect our greatest asset. We were so young, I was 35, he was 41. And I just thought, he's not going to be disabled. He's super healthy. And that was, you have to protect your assets, right? I mean, most states force you to get automobile insurance for at least liability purposes.
Right.
But all mortgage companies will insist you get homeowners insurance. We need to protect our assets. And when you're young, your greatest asset is your ability to earn income. So there's a little of the finance side to it. But I had eyes wide open as far as the finances going into this. And I think Keith and I were an anomaly. We got married. I was 20. He had just turned 27 when we got married. And we went ahead and got life insurance, and we wrote our first will shortly after getting married. And we moved to a different state a couple of years later, and we had to get a new will drawn because it was a different state laws. Then we moved back to North Carolina. That was the third time we had our will done. And after his diagnosis, it was the fourth time we were looking at the will. And all of a sudden it was real, right? The healthcare power of attorney questions of, life sustaining food and hydration was real at that point. And I'm just like, thank goodness we weren't looking at that for the first time, because it could be totally jarring to do so. But it wasn't our first time. It was our fourth. And I think that made it a little bit easier to go through, because certainly there were enough hard emotions of what this life is actually going to look like with small children in our home. So on diagnosis day, we were at the Duke ALS clinic. There were a couple appointments leading up to that, of course. And we're at the Duke ALS clinic, and the doctor told us, I'm 80% sure that this is ALS, which is, arguably with Alzheimer's, one of the two worst diagnoses.
That must have been so surreal.
It was awful. And the doctor, told us, and then he asked if we had any questions, and then was like, okay, I'm going to leave, because we were both speechless. And I was like, wait, and my throat was so dry, I could barely get the words out. And then I was like, do you have any literature for children? And just lost it. I just completely lost it. And they sent the ALS Association representative in, and I was given a whole bunch of handbooks and things. When we got home, we told the children that there was still a possibility that it might be a copper deficiency. And my daughter just she was 10 at the time, hopped off the couch and skipped to her bedroom and said, I'll just hope it's a copper deficiency. And my son was writhing. Just absolutely writhing in the chair across the room. And I'm thinking, what? He was 14 at the time. Like, what 8th grader knows what ALS is? And his teacher had a neurological disease, and they had just been talking about it like a week or two prior. Wow. So it was really, surreal is a really good word. You always think, weird things happen, but not to my family, right? So,
sure. We all have that protective measure to keep these tragedies and these things at arm's length. And then to have to not only endure it and experience it in that drawn out process that you went through and all those other speed bumps along the way, but then to have to go home and talk to your children about this finality and this trauma that is, inevitable. And that is such a hard burden to shoulder as a mother, right? Mm-hmm. I understand that. And you must have been reeling at that point, trying to put ducks in a row. And how was that for you? I can't even imagine.
So you have to remember too, I come with the financial planning hat, and I went to a caregiving meeting, and they gave me the statistic, over 50% of caregivers die before their spouses. And I'm thinking, it's huge. I'm not an older woman, so, but I was having panic attacks, and I was kind of like, well, stress kills, right? So I want every widow to hear that too, because the amount of stress we endure after loss in that first couple of years is immense. And so paying attention to your physiological responses is crucial. But yes. I was having massive anxiety and panic attacks at that point. And so I called my mom. My mom's my healthcare power of attorney today. It used to, of course, be Keith, my late husband. But my mom is the person that I know can filter things for my father. My father's super emotional. So I called my mom and I said, hey, listen, if I die before Keith, if I get hit by the proverbial bus, will you take the kids? Right? Because my will read, if both of us die. But I was like, will you take Keith too? Right? I'm going to ask my parents to take on ALS in their home so my kids can still be with their dad, but my children would only go through one move. This is where my head was. It was, how do I take care of all the catastrophic thinking, mitigate and plan for it? So at least these little things that I can control might help me sleep better at night or reduce the panic and anxiety.
Because it's that existential world crumbling, and you're trying to keep the sky from falling every day, all day. It feels quite that insurmountable. At least for me, it did in the beginning. It was every decision was a big decision. And that's something we hear a lot as widows too, right? Is don't make any big moves for the first year. And
I hate that.
I hate that advice. But from a financial planning perspective, as widows specifically, we don't have the luxury to not make moves. So how do you advise people or women or widows? How do you, from that experiential but also financial planner hat, mitigate that common misconception?
Great question. And I actually I've had the opportunity to speak to funeral directors, estate attorneys, other financial advisors. I've spoken nationally and in a couple different conferences to financial advisors. And I would say we are on the front line, right? I think widows need two professionals right out the gate. One is a certified financial planner who does a holistic financial plan, meaning that they will look at your cash flow and your checkbook and your credit card statements and help you with financial management, basic household financial management, all the way through the investments and the taxes and the estate plan. They must look at personal finance holistically together, because everything has likely changed for you unless you had a really great plan going into widowhood.
Which isn't the case usually.
Not usually, no. I mean, 50% of people die intestate, which means without a will. So like,
And 50% of all widows are under the age of 60.
Yeah. So like when you think about things like that, like, don't wait till retirement to get your will. I think all of us get that voice, and we have earned our soapbox having gone through the probate process to kind of, I know Brene Brown says not to shame anybody, but like, hey, friends, hey, cousins and family in my age group, don't let this happen to you.
You just watched me go through this,
Right.
made for TV movie in real life. Like, don't do this.
Yeah. The best way you can honor me and our friendship is go get your stuff together so I can be a good friend for you when it's your turn on the front row of the funeral, right? Like, that's the best way you can honor me and my late spouse, is go get your ducks in a row. Go get a financial planner today, So yeah, I think that as our job as financial planners, that we are one of the two professionals that are needed right out of the gate. And the reason I say that is, like, you have 60 days to make a COBRA decision. 60 days from the date of death. Like, where are we 2 months out? Right. So pension decisions are usually 90 days, like it runs the gamut. Like, some of those timely things are important. But when people choose to get up and get showered and go to an event in fresh widowhood, that's a big decision. And so I've told the public, the general public who doesn't have the uncommon knowledge that we have, that they have to stop saying that. It's trite, and it actually robs us of our experience. It's probably one of the worst platitudes, right up there with "he's in a better place." Whatever.
I could do a whole separate episode on just platitudes. I think I actually have. But you say something quite poignant there, is that it is this unknown knowledge. Why is it so gatekept when it happens so frequently? Why is it such a disingenuous understanding of the experience when it's such a common occurrence?
Something I learned recently, I was watching a YouTube video, and I wish I could credit the person, but I can't, of course, remember who it was. They talked about how when it was his front row at the funeral, his wife died in her 30s of a massive heart attack.
Oof.
Totally healthy person. And he said all of his friends came to the funeral and they were crying, and he was not. And they told him that he was so strong and that he was doing such a great job and he was holding up so well. And he's like, I was numb. And I look at it, I would say, you're in shock, right? You do not believe that your spouse is dead, nor do you have any belief or understanding of what dead means. Like, you're not a child. We get dead means never coming back. There's an object
permanence there.
Right. But the permanence, like, I'd still come home and wait for Keith to walk through the door. Like, there were certain times, Joan Didion's book, A Year of Magical Thinking, I think does a great job on how your brain doesn't let you peel back those layers to the permanency. We're not ready to live it, lean into it, talk about, I couldn't talk, I couldn't read. But
which
I think
is a common thing too, that just cognitive temporary malfunction is so common, and people don't understand that either.
Right. But think about this too. Also, when you go to the funeral, you're still showing up as a wife and in service of, right? So like, I went from 24/7 caregiver of a full quadriplegic, where I was exhausted, waking up multiple times a night, all of those types of things, to, oh my gosh, I had nothing to do. So by the time the funeral came around, it was like, I get to facilitate this. I'm a part of something still in service of my husband. And I was in shock. And I probably, although looked widowed, was extremely strong. It was a celebration of life. I was proud of the people who eulogized him. We had all of that stuff arranged.
You're wearing the mom hat and, being strong for your kids and, still holding that together for them and all of those pieces at once.
So yeah, exactly. And we've talked about like the last casserole, right? You are truly starting to unravel those layers and understanding the permanence of death and what your new life looks like about the time that last casserole comes, right? Or a couple months in, and maybe the shock and disbelief has worn off and other people are done serving you, right? They're ready for you to pick up and move on, especially in our age group. Like, don't worry, you'll find someone new. What?
That was literally said to me at the funeral.
Right. Like, don't you think someone new would like an emotionally healthy, grounded person to be with, not, someone who's unraveling? So yeah, I think a lot of it is because of our timeline and misunderstanding. Like what you see in the first couple months is you might see someone who on one spectrum you're not going to see at all because they are pulling the cover over their head and they are choosing to turn down all the invites out, to the other spectrum of the person who's like operating on the checklist. They've got a job to do. And then those are the people that usually fall apart in year 2. That was me.
Yeah, that was me too. I really held it together year 1, and year 2 was a lot of trial by fire and correcting ill choices. And I tried very hard, right? But there's so much information coming at you, especially when you have like, my late husband had a state job. So there was pension and, then Social Security and all of his other various pay facets. But I also came from a place of financial illiteracy, and he managed the checkbook and filed the taxes. And so there was a steep learning curve, and it was very intimidating and wrapped in trauma that was already existing. And so to have someone to talk to would have been incredible. But the piece that I found was really a barrier was the financial barrier. So, they either financial planners don't want to talk to you unless you, make $1 million, or they, charge for their services. And you're so wrapped up in that scarcity mindset where you're like, either you're spending it all because you have no framework to work within, or you're hoarding it, like you said at the beginning, because you're so afraid of that stability and that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. How do people access that information when there's those types of barriers there? How do they find a professional to talk to, or, get that information to get the ball rolling?
So I really encourage like the ongoing and building a relationship that's going to last years, because I hate to burst bubbles here, but if losing your spouse is the number one most stressful life event, and like moving into a new house is like the 30th, right? Think about how long it takes for you to find a new dentist, hairdresser, schools for the kids, organize your closet and your pantry, fold up that last box after you move into a new house. A year, 2 years. I mean, those things take a long time. If losing your spouse is on the Holmes-Ray stress test number 1, then yeah, it's going to take 7 years on average. That's exactly what it is. So I've been in financial. The financial transitionists say it's about 4 to 6 years before you start seeing your new normal. And that's, understanding that most people will have 5 or 6 major life transitions. And on average, they take 4 to 6 years. So the number 1 life transition, of course, it would be on the far end. Modern Widows Club did the research that takes 7 years. And I was at a conference, a women's summit recently, and an advisor that was speaking just kind of, she's like, I'm sure you guys have seen widows. It takes 5 to 10 years. And I was like, yeah, average 7. Yeah, that's exactly right. So, but it's not like all crisis and chaos. It's not deep mourning. So I don't want anyone to think like, oh my gosh, I've got another, 4 or 5 years of this. And it's like, it's not of this. It's you will learn how to be independent and solo on the planet. And it takes a long time.
And it's hard.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Like my kids are 24 and 28 now. Like I asked I told my son about a healthcare power of attorney, and he's like, I hope you have an adult or adult for that. And said, yes, I do. It's grandma.
I need an adult to your adult. Yep.
But the adulting and, it's so hard. So that's why like finding an advisor, I think having a grief counselor, right, to help you figure out how to verbalize and voice and even feel your feelings as baseline as that is. We have all been leveled to baseline in almost every major area of our lives. How many of us are either overeating or not hungry at all?
It's like being an infant all over again. You're really relearning how to navigate the world and understand object permanence and relationships and social contract. It is like being an infant all over again. It's a very bizarre cornucopia of experiences.
Yeah. And so if marriage touches everything and money touches everything, why wouldn't you get a professional to hold your hand through this? It's not necessarily time to learn, but you will learn going through the process, right? So I would say find a financial planner who works holistically, who can answer, do you work with clients like me? If you're their first widow, probably not the best choice, unless they're really willing to learn together. I mean, I take on 4 to 6 clients per year, because most of them are either caregivers or widows. That is my niche. That is who I want to serve. That's who I feel like I've been called to serve because of my past and background and the way that my husband and I navigated the challenges of caregiving, dealing with a terminal illness with children in the home. I'm pretty good at facilitating those conversations because I've already had to have them in the hardest, most heartfelt way. Right. And it's no longer about me, but I know what it looks like. It's about you. It's your turn to have somebody else facilitate those hard conversations if you're lucky enough to hear this as a caregiver. And as a widow, so in my industry, we talk about, we partner with our clients. And I'm like, all right, that's all la-ti-da and really nice when things are normal, that you can be a decision maker and partner with your clients. And to a degree, I do that with fresh widows, but really, I'm an advisor. I'm going to bring things to you that I know are pertinent for decisions for you to make in your life now. So we talk about like partner versus guide. Those are the words that most financial planners will use, like, I'll be your guide, or, I'll partner with you on decisions. And I'm like, I go from advisor to advocate. Like I know in year 1 or year 2, you really need an advocate, someone who's looking out for your best interest.
Because you don't know how to look out for your own. You really need that adultier adult.
Right. And for finances in particular, like there's so much surrounding finances that, most people don't have the right amount of savings in a savings account, right? It's like, I don't even remember the percentage, have under $2,000 in savings versus, how many people are on track for retirement. And all those are normal basic things. But now we're taking normal basic things and traumatizing it. Your entire household. It's like, the magic 8 ball, what's going to come up as the answer? I don't know, but you have to retitle everything. You have to adjust to a new income and income sources, maybe survivor benefits or things like that, nothing about.
Then take time to access too. So there's periods of potential lack of income or income instability. And it's this scarcity mindset. You literally are just in survival mode.
Right. And negotiating medical debt or credit card debt.
Or even accessing Social Security or filling out those applications or having the bandwidth to navigate those nuanced systems in that timely fashion without an advisor. That's how I did it. And it was hell. It was like being waterboarded with gasoline. So how do people start that path?
Yeah, anyone who's listening, feel free to reach out to me for my notebook resource. And I mean,
Mm.
it's kind of lame, but you'll understand if you've been there. It's essentially how to stay on top of things, asking them, what forms do I need? What forms do you need from me? What is your timeline and process? If it's 3 to 5 business days, making that calendar reminder on your phone on day 7 or 8.
That's a
So
cheat
it's,
code right there.
yeah, it's just,
That's a
it's
widow
a nice
cheat
little
code.
PDF for you to walk around with, like, carry a
Yeah,
notebook
it's
fits
your
in your
roadmap.
purse. Yeah. So you're there because, even you just changing names on the power bill. I mean, those are antiquated systems. That was one of the few places that needed the original death certificate. I don't know about you, but I could pretty much scan it in and send it everywhere. I got 10. I think I used 2.
Yeah, they talked
So
me into buying 20 and I used like 5 of them.
mhm.
They're like, oh, they're harder to get later. And I'm like, well,
They're
that's a
not.
bunch of baloney. And all those
It's
types of things that,
emotionally,
yeah,
yeah, it's
it's
emotionally
taxing
distressing. But aside from that, it
beyond.
can be like one of those triggering grief burst moments. So when you're looking for an advisor, I would say you want to go to broker check. If you just put broker check in the Google and type in either the firm or the last name of the advisor or first and last name, it will come up and let you know if there's any disclosures, any red
Ooh,
flags that maybe they went through in their career.
that's a great
Um,
tip.
some red flags like client complaints may not be legitimate, but they have to report them. So it
Hmm.
doesn't mean like if they have a disclosure, it's a no-go. But I just looked up someone recently and they had several DUIs, they had a couple shoplifting charges,
Oh my God.
and they had a settled client complaint. A settled client complaint is not a good thing. Like the rest of
Hmm.
it's not good. I can't even believe he could hold a license, but you know,
But just
Bernie
doing due
Madoff,
diligence and
Bernie
having
Madoff
the
was,
access to research who you're working with to give you that peace of mind a little bit. That's a
yeah.
really great piece of advice. A lot of financial things for women, specifically for widows, seem to be much harder than they are for our male counterparts. Trying to get a loan, especially as a business owner, but as a widow or as a woman is incredibly difficult. How we file taxes, we have that qualifying widow status for the first 2 years, and there's those types of parameters. And statistically speaking, we're more likely to be audited. Do you encounter similar hurdles working with the female demographic with the financial planning piece? And why do you think it's so difficult for women?
Of course. And yes, I mean, I think just, feminism, all it means is equality. We would like
Hmm.
equal access. That's all the word feminism means. I'm trying to make sure that people don't make that synonymous with the B word. I am a feminist. I always have been, and I will always be. And so is my daughter, and hopefully my son. I
Yeah,
should have that conversation. It just means equality, and we don't have equal access, which is very true. And it breaks my heart. It's very sad. And again, I think people are quicker to teach their sons about money, that they're
mm,
supposed to be the protector provider. Well, yeah, sure. My husband was the protector provider too. He had the larger income. He was the masculine,
right.
very
But
much
women
so.
outlive men.
But
So how did we get that backwards?
right. But at some point, it is highly likely as a married woman that you will be holding the purse strings at some point. So start learning it when it's easy. But this is like getting a PhD in catastrophic finance. And again, why wouldn't you have a mentor, an advocate, an advisor, whatever you want to call us, by your side? So yeah, and for you, like it's qualified surviving spouse is now the terminology the IRS uses. I was 4 of the 5 tax filing statuses in 9 years, right? That
Wow.
first year, no matter what your situation is, the first year during when the death occurs, you are allowed to be married filing jointly for your very last time.
Yep.
Whether or not you have a dependent will let you know if you can have that qualified surviving spouse, which is essentially you get the same tax brackets as married filing jointly. And then after that, you will go to head of household if you have dependents in the home.
Mm-hmm.
And then you will be a single filer. For anyone who doesn't have children or dependents in the home, they will go from married filing jointly to a single filer, and that is called the widow tax. So
Mm.
any of those changes, except for married filing jointly to qualifying surviving spouse, which used to be qualifying widow, is the widow tax. That means, if you had $100,000 income, married filing jointly, and now you have $100,000 income, but you're single, you're probably paying the U.S. government about $4,000 more in taxes because of your filing status. Yeah.
Well, I know I got audited 2 years in a row. And so that's a whole other, ball of wax, because I hired someone, but they had no experience working with widows that second year. And they did me as head of household instead of as qualifying widow. And then, I got audited, and what an incredible nightmare to navigate that was. So just having someone lay out a step-by-step potential timeline is invaluable. And I'm hoping the listeners are, taking notes, making notes, going back, re-listening to this one, because I think there's some really valuable information in that, preparedness. How do we better prepare our futures in the aftermath of losing our spouse? How do we prepare our children for this inevitable that we hope never happens to them? How do we find our footing financially?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Again, I would say partner with a professional, not someone who's going to sell you a product and walk away, but someone who, like me, I meet with my fresh widows every 2 weeks.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if you don't feel like showering or showing up on Zoom or whatever it is, like, let's still have that 2-week appointment. And if I get a no-show, they get the last checklist and, hey, where are you on this? And, you can call me, we can just do a phone call. But someone who helps you go through the process, that's really great. Also, I hope you were able to go back. I had a widow who claimed her child survivor benefits on her taxes, and we were able to go back. It was another widow CPA, or sorry, she was an EA, enrolled agent, who caught it and refiled her the last 3 years to get her over $7,000 back that she did not owe in taxes. So you can go back and make amendments, but as hard as life is, especially with undoing, like, we're kind of on autopilot and we might not know about these things. So how do you start learning? I wouldn't even say like year 1 and year 2 is a great time to learn. It's not. It's so sad. You want a fiduciary to work with, because it's hard, but it is almost like asking someone to blindly trust you. Like, I got you and I got this and I'm going to be here. So it's really a huge risk in the professional that you choose. So I would say, bring second ears to the appointment.
And for those listening who don't know what the word fiduciary means, can you give the listeners just a snapshot?
So yeah, fiduciary is just, I guess, an Italian word or a old Latin word like executrix, that means that the professional that you're working with has a fiduciary oath, which means that they're going to put your best interest ahead of theirs.
They're legally obligated to have your best interest in the forefront of their mind doing their jobs. They have a legal obligation to do a good job, is basically what that means.
Exactly. So like when you work at insurance company as an advisor, insurance companies, or even some of the big wirehouses, they have their own proprietary investment tools or products. And I, as an advisor, might be incentivized to sell that to you over something else. And that's in my best interest, because usually you get a higher percentage for selling that product. So the term fiduciary is very important. I'm also a fee-only advisor, meaning I can be hired for a project or hourly, as opposed to, as you mentioned, everybody needs $1 million to walk through our doors to get a sophisticated, understanding planner. And that's not the case. So the one other organization I would refer the listeners to is NAPFA, NAPFA. It stands for the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors.
Wow.
You don't need a retirement specialist. You need a personal financial advisor, right? So you don't need, an estate planning specialist. You need someone who can operate and really help you holistically on the entire personal finance, which is your home, customized and holistic to you, your situation, and your future. Like I said, I was the 4 of the 5 tax filing statuses in 9 years. you better believe I was planning for that. Married
But that's
filing jointly means
exhausting.
I could do a Roth conversion, but like technically I had that filing status for 3 years because 2 years was qualifying widow. So for
Mm,
3 years, my capital gains rate was higher. My income rate was higher. So I was doing something called filling your tax bracket. Like I was
gotcha.
maximizing income in a way, I wasn't earning it necessarily, but I could really make use of the rules that were in place to make my future better for retirement. I mean, I'm 49. I was 38 when Keith died, and I'm 49 now. So did it matter to me today? No, but I don't want to pass up that opportunity.
Sure. And I think, it's interesting that you have the perspective of being the math teacher and having that very numerically minded framework. I'm not that person. I'm an English major by trade and a writer and I'm a Renaissance man, if you will. So to be able to look at your own personal situation with the appreciation and love for numbers, it's almost like having a fluency in that language. And
Yes.
there's a huge gap of the widowhood population that are not fluent in finances in any way, shape, or form. So I would say just listening to podcasts like this and read articles and ask questions and set up those initial appointments to start getting that comfort and education and exposure to
Mhm.
the numbers will start to make a big difference, because being widows makes us research experts, right? Like that first
Right.
3 years, we become expert researchers. And it
Mhm.
is such an unnecessary but necessary evil, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Like Professor Google is not going to tell you what's right for you because they don't know that you have a 7-year-old child at home. That's
right.
just those kinds of nuances. Like you could read all day long about a Roth IRA only to be like, oh, shoot, what do you mean I can't do it? Oh, I earn too much.
And then you
There's
start the
different,
paperwork on
yeah,
your own because you're a
yeah,
self,
you're
starter.
sold, you're
And
going to
then
do it.
yep, exactly. So I do want to take the minute to touch on, you had mentioned briefly the Widow Squad. I would love for you to share more about that with the listeners. What's the Widow Squad?
There are a couple widowed women that have put together essentially a place where you can go and you can learn a lot more on all facets of widowhood. And they get professional experts to come in and speak and teach. They have a lot of content themselves in various different forms, whether your best learning is a podcast or if you want newsletters and content. And they have presentations, one that they just finished up, reimagining purpose.
Yeah, that was
And
great.
yeah, so that's a really great resource. Another really great resource is the Modern Widows Club. They are
Yeah.
a national nonprofit organization that has done the most current research on widowhood today. Unfortunately, the needle hasn't moved much from a book that was copyrighted in 1996 called Current Widowhood. And I got
Mm,
that book. I needed the numbers, Kate. Like I needed to, if I were going to read, just reading a graph or statistics was helpful to me to feel normal
mm.
because nothing feels normal,
Nothing
right?
feels normal. And you just need a validation of your experience to go,
Right.
okay, I'm not crazy. And this is really happening.
Right. But like no one's going to celebrate you for making your bed that day. In fact, nobody even knows you did or didn't. Maybe your kids. Well, you didn't do it, mom. I don't have to,
And
but
it's
like,
such a big deal when you do.
right. But that's why I say,
Celebrating that.
like,
Yeah.
making a major decision, like taking a shower and getting dressed and showing up. That's how I approached my early phase of widowhood, was that weird saying, like, if showing up is half the battle, then I could at least do that. That's what I always had in my mind on the days I didn't want to get up. Was number one, I was a role
Mm,
model for my kids at home and I needed them
yeah.
to go to school. But the other was I just walked through whatever was on my calendar and I tried to say yes to most things. And I would stop people in their tracks and put it on my calendar on my phone because I would forget. If you say
Yes.
you're going to go back and put that in later, no, you will forget. The brain fog, widow fog is real. So I would just show up. But yeah, some people will say like there's no coursework on widowhood, and there is. The Modern Widows Club has content. You take their widow empowerment quiz. It will tell you if you're in the hope, heal, grow, or lead phase, and they They give away their first section for fresh widows. And then I think it's like maybe $200-300 to get the next coursework. And they look at it through the lens of the 7 pillars of healthy living. So, right, we have physical health, mental health, relationship health, right?
It very much is that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I think is such an incredible overarching framework for the widowhood experience.
Yep. And it helps when you can go to groups. So that's the unusual thing about Modern Widows Club that I needed so much. Like when I was going through my caregiving years, I had caregiving support groups. I had other ALS, they call them PALS, patients, patients with ALS or people with ALS, but then they had caregiving meetings for the families.
Wow.
I mean, learning how to live with a quadriplegic, a universally accessible home, bath chair, the toileting chairs, a Hoyer lift, a rotating bed, a cough assist device. I have very trained hands. I never wanted them to be. I have none of this knowledge, but now I have so much knowledge on what that is like. And the caregiving groups are where I learned life hacks, where I felt normal. You know, if someone tells me they're a caregiver, the empathy that I have, I'm like, I know their exhaustion because I've been there. I know their stress and discomfort because I've been there, you know, to the point that anyone can know anybody else's story. But also like,
you have the appreciation of perspective.
Right. And I don't want to be known as the queen of toileting, but if you've had a newborn baby, you know what it's like to be peed on, you know what it's like to be vomited on. And you know how disgusting it is changing poopy diapers, right? So as a caregiver, you know that you've done that for an adult, and it is so emotionally grueling on so many different levels, emasculating for the man that you love. And, like dealing with how do I serve and yet preserve the relationship? Well, the same thing happened in widowhood. I spent 5 years in widowhood before I went to a Modern Widows Club meeting. The closest one to me was Atlanta, 6 hours away. And I happened to be going on a trip to Atlanta in 2019. So I think Modern Widows Club, one of the most beautiful things they do is they bring together a community of widows to focus on a healthy topic of conversation based on their 7 pillars of healthy living. So much like a caregiving group, there is a widow support group where you could go and learn the other resources, life hacks. We share each other's maintenance men, people that are trustworthy. We talk about finances and estate.
It's like a networking group.
It's amazing. And everyone's experience is different, but yet all of us have that quote unquote same life experience. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful thing to have a support group. Like in my perfect world, every community would have a Modern Widows Club community in it.
I love that. And I wish there was a way to extrapolate that philosophy, empathy, and holistic, just human operation where we didn't have to have a specific club, right? But the sad fact of the matter is it is such a nuanced and fingerprint-like experience that we really do need that special set club that none of us wanted to belong to, right? It is an unfortunate series of events, but we are fortunate to have one another to lean on. And for all the listeners out there, just remember, you're not alone. And beyond the financial planning piece or the money piece, having that co-captain, that, grief captain, that fellow widow, fellow commiserator, reach out, find your community, find your people. You're not alone. And the fog does lift. The burden does feel lighter eventually, at least in my experience. So we are just about at the end of our time together, but I want to make sure that our listeners have the opportunity to find you and learn more about you. So where can they find you?
So the website for my company is apprisewealth.com. Apprise, A-P-P-R-I-S-E. Apprise actually means to inform. So if you'd like an informed widowhood, feel free to reach out to me. I have 15 and 30-minute calendar blocks on that site, or you can email me. I prefer phone calls over email, but I will get that notebook resource to you, or if you want an organizational list of documents. If you don't have an organizational system, you feel free to email me because you can use mine.
Love that. We will make sure that we pin that in the show notes and get that up on my website as well to share with people so they have access to that. Before we end our time together, is there any advice or anything you'd like to say to the listeners?
One thing that came up for me just in your last comment was I just feel like if there was a theme song to widowhood, that it might be that U2 song, You Don't Have to Go It Alone. There's the chorus to it. I wish a female would maybe somebody else has remade that song, but I would love to hear that from a widow's perspective. You don't have to go it alone. There are other widows out here that are really happy to support you. That's where I find my fulfillment, is meeting people at what I know is the most horrific tragedy and helping reduce suffering in any way that I can. So I think that would be my advice primarily, is that you don't have to go it alone. And yes, you do have to be careful who you choose to bring into that close circle, but you should be looking towards the professionals for support, especially in early widowhood. We like to think that our families are close and supportive, but if they don't have the experience, they are likely the most, the ones that will give you financial advice that you probably shouldn't adhere to, or those platitudes, you'll find someone again, or,
At least they're not suffering anymore.
Right. He's free from the wheelchair. So go see the professionals, get a grief counselor, get a financial planner, and encourage others to do the same. And don't buy any of those big annuity or permanent life insurance products. I see that a lot, especially with younger widows. We want to make sure our kids are covered should we not live. And you can do that with a 10 or 20-year term. You do not need to buy $1 million whole life policy at $20,000 a year. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, there are loopholes in information. It's just you have to get second opinions and ask questions and seek resources. And I think everyone out there listening is lucky to have you as one of their new resources.
Well, thank you. I mean, there's definitely reasons for those products, and they might be the best thing for you, but I would definitely get a second opinion before you make that commitment, because it's a large financial commitment that usually come with surrender charges and fees that are beyond belief. So get someone to help you analyze if that's the right decision for you. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Megan, for taking the time to chat with me today. I really hope that this was as beneficial for you as it was for me. And just a friendly reminder to all the listeners out there, you can check out Megan on her website, or I will link her to my website, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to the Happily Never After show.
Thanks for having me, Kate. Really appreciate it. You've helped a lot.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Happily Never After, part of the Xvadio podcast network. You can catch every episode of Happily Never After, as well as the rest of the network, at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts.